in our assignment today, there's not really anything that we're doing other than reading, and this is we're going to end the week with this tomorrow as well. Um, I put in here Dr. Heidegger's experiment, but I also wanted to look at allegory real quick, because parable, allegory, and things like that, they're really close, and a lot of times people get allegory and parable confused. So let me share my screen again. So here's the thing. What is the difference between allegory and a parable? All right, so a parable is used to teach a moral lesson, and that's just a simple way to say it. In the black veil, the author included a very noticeable symbol, which was the black veil. He used that symbol or symbolic device in order to kind of show separation of the people, or separation of the individual itself. But we want to show that there's two types of separation. A parable can have all the elements. I do want you to see that. Typically seen in literature, metaphor, imagery, symbols, etc. But ultimately, it's a story really just teaching a lesson. All right, so what is an allegory? An allegory also, most of the time, will teach a lesson or show something, but it's different from a parable. So this is not something that you need to answer. There's no, this is not like it's an assignment, but I do want you to watch the 60-second video. And then you'll decide how is an allegory different from the parable. All right, so I'm going to play that video real quick.
If you're drowning in a sea of symbols, you're probably wishing for a life preserver. I'll throw you one next. It's the definition of allegory. In almost every book you read for English, you'll probably come across at least one symbol. But when everything stands for something else, you don't just have an author who's obsessed with symbols. You have an allegory. Now, I'm not big on scholarly stuff, but here's a tidbit that's actually pretty awesome. Allegory comes from the Greek word allegoria, which means speaking otherwise. Translation: an allegory is all about double meaning. You've got what's going on the surface of the story, and then you have a political or social message that all the elements of the story are working together to convey. There's no telltale sign for an allegory, but often allegories have fantastical elements. And context helps too. If you know the author had a thing for criticizing the government, you might have an allegory on your hands. Still confused? Lord of the Flies, Gulliver's Travels, and The Wizard of Oz are all allegories. Check one out to experience allegory firsthand, or click on this video again for a repeat tutorial.
Okay, yay. All right, so an allegory is really going to teach something, but it also helps to know, if you caught that in there, helps to know a little bit about what the author might be focusing on. At this point, what is Nathaniel Hawthorne focusing on most of the time that we've seen? I say that we've only seen one story, but I talked about the Scarlet Letter, and I've given you hints that he really talks about the Puritan religion. The Puritans themselves, his ancestors, especially remember I taught one of his uncles or one of his relatives was a minor judge during the Salem witch trials, which was an unfortunate circumstance. And I think it kind of haunted him that it was that way. I'm sorry, probably should have done this. There we go. I thought. All right. So yeah. It haunted him quite a bit that those were his relatives. So what you're about to read is another story by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Now, what I want you to see is the difference. He called the first one, Minister's Black Veil, a parable. He told us there's a moral lesson in this. Now, an allegory, just about everything that's in this, as far as the characters, it's going to mean something. So some sort of symbol is in there with the characters, and they mean something. It's actually a better story, a much more entertaining story than the Minister's Black Veil, but it does lead into a lot of focus on what Hawthorne was trying to overall tell us. Now, in the next, the lesson for today, this is actually due tomorrow, or you have 2 days to work on this, because I know we've had a lot of things this week. And so you're going to read Dr. Heidegger's Experiment. And I thought I had it up already, but I guess I didn't. So you should be able to click on it and read it that way. And I did not put the Audible in there, but within the next couple of days, this is what we want to focus on, and I'm going to show you my screen. There we go. So before you read Dr. Heidegger's Experiment, suppose you were given the chance to be very young again. You'll see this a bit, I think, next week too. So I want you to think about that when you're as you're reading. Suppose you were given the chance to be young again and start your teenage years over, because you're in your teenage years now. But suppose you could start all over again. Not that you want to go back to age 13, but think about that. Would you relive your life differently? Is there any changes that you would do? Or do you think you would make the same mistakes? So just something to think about. Okay, so here's our definition of allegory again. Allegory is a literary work in which characters, settings, and events stand for abstract ideas or moral qualities. They can be symbolic in nature, so keep that in mind. In some famous allegories, characters are named for qualities they stand for: hope, worldly wisdom, worldly wise man, little faith, and so on. Hawthorne does not go this far, but he makes clear that what his characters represent, and you'll see that in his story. Pay close attention to the way he describes the characters. Okay, allegorical characters are often one-dimensional, since they're meant to represent only a particular aspect of human nature. Look carefully too for moral. The didactic or instructive purpose of most allegories is not intended to be obscure. So it should be fairly obvious what's going on by the time you get to the end. The writer wants you to get the message. In some allegories, the moral is so obvious that the reader is practically banged over the head with it. This is not the case here. It's a little more subtle, so no worries. All right, so Dr. Heidegger's Experiment, make sure that you are working on that. And I believe the assignment too, part of this is also to include the questions in the thing. What do you learn about Heidegger's past? So some of those questions within that document, I want to make sure that's correct before I send you moving on. Yeah, answer on a Google Doc the box questions within the text, just like we did for the minister's black veil. All right, so